I did not want to be the one introducing this special issue, which is a collaboration between Arabic Quarterly and Majalla 28. We finished the issue and set the date for this event on the evening of Sunday, May 5th, when at least a temporary ceasefire seemed possible. Instead, the very next day, attacks expanded and intensified, including an invasion of Rafah, where our two co-editors were living. Since then, the horrors of this genocide have only multiplied. Dozens of people have been killed in bombardments just today, next to a hospital, while fetching water, in a school, and the poet Musab Abu Toha said this afternoon that at least 11 civilians got killed in an airstrike on a bookshop in which families were sheltering in Jabalia camp. Our co-editors are not able to join us today, but I will introduce them and then read a brief text from Mahmoud. Mohammed Zakzouk is a researcher born in Khan Yunis in 1990. He studied Arabic language and literature at Al-Aqsa University and is a contributor to various Palestinian and Arab platforms. Currently, he coordinates community library and youth teams at the Tamer Foundation for Community Education. His poetry collection, The Soothsayers of Khanun, won the Khalili Poetry Award at the first Palestinian Cultural Forum for Creative Writers in 2018. Mahmoud Al-Shair is a Palestinian poet and cultural activist from Gaza, known for his deep engagement with literature and the arts. Currently, Mahmoud serves as the executive director and editor-in-chief of Majalla 28, a platform aimed at expressing Palestinian culture through various activities and publications. He has contributed significantly to the cultural sphere through his work at the restored Al Hussein House in Gaza, and Mahmoud has served on multiple committees and editorial boards. He's the founder and member of many cultural initiatives, including Majalla 28, Cordoba Cultural Gathering, and Khutta Publishing. And this is from Mahmoud. Me, Hadil, and Nai are physically still fine, thank God. We left our home Wednesday morning, May 8th, carrying with us what we would need in our new place or places after the house. I took the sun power system, mattresses, blankets, a water barrel, our summer and winter clothes, our stock of drinking water, canned food, flour, and gas. Half a tent on family-owned land on the southwestern edge of Block 90, according to the Army map, accommodating all my belongings. I slept in the remaining half for 5 nights, then moved within the same area to a room with a kitchen and bathroom that had been occupied for the past 5 months by a family from Khan Yunis. They returned to their home, which had been hit by incendiary shells and repaired enough to provide them shelter. And here I am now, living in their place, not knowing if we will return to the house again or if we will find it if we do return. Many questions swirl in my head about the house and my entire life connected to it since I was born in April 1990 until May 8th, 2024. My fate is unknown, completely cut off from the events and news around me, as there is no infrastructure, no water, no internet, no sewage lines. There is nothing in the safe zone except the tent's place. The people around me are silent, confusion in their eyes, and insomnia ravages everyone. The crossings have been closed for 10 days. This is the 11th night, far from home, captive to an alphabet that does not resemble me. The dimensions of time have multiplied. Here I am now, tension burning through my days. I don't want to believe that I have left and will not return to the house again. Who has left, us or the house? So that's from Mahmoud. And then after this, the first person to speak will be Atif Al-Shair, who's a senior lecturer in Arabic studies at the University of Westminster. He's also a poet and translator who grew up in the Gaza Strip. He's published several books, including the classic Map of Absence, an anthology of Palestinian writing on the Nakba. He's also co-editor of a new collection of poems called Out of Gaza, and we'll be sharing a link with more information about that book in the chat. Thank you so much, Atif, for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Marcia. This is really wonderful, and I'm so glad to see the issue being framed behind you. It's very nice. I haven't really prepared a speech, so this is going to be a bit just impromptu like that. And just to say that it was really very moving to read the accounts of people, particularly from our dear Gaza. It made a very vivid image of what they're going through. And it's something that my family has also been sharing with me. I have a family in Rafah who had just been forced to leave their homes just about 10 days ago when this latest incursion took place. And ever since, it's really been very difficult to communicate with them. So it's an amazing to have this record of what people are going through and their feeling and also their imagination. And so on. As for my contribution to this wonderful journal, I mean, there's the interview that I have with Lindsay, and it's an interview which we started a bit earlier when things were happening, about, I think, January. And we recorded it. And it was just to give people a sense of what Gaza is and what it has been historically and in the present moment. And we gave some names, like Mu'in Bseso, nowadays, obviously, Mas'ab Abu Toha and Yahya Ashur and others. And it's been really, since this started, I have been engaging a lot with Gaza in the form of writing for the Al Arabi Al Jadid on almost a weekly basis, articles to document what is happening, to engage with the plight of doctors, the plight of children, the plight of women, the houses, every aspect somehow to evoke something out of it, because it's deeply unprecedented. And I don't think our imagination, our souls are prepared for what has been happening. So words are a form of somehow approximation or an attempt to try to be engaged with the situation, because it's an absolute atrocity, and it's such a blight that I feel there's nothing else, more important than being engaged with it and with my family and with my people in Gaza and Palestine more broadly. So this is where the interview came from. And then I have a poem there as well, which I can perhaps read later if you would like. But maybe I'll stop it. What?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you can read it now. And also, if you could just tell us a little bit about the collection that you put together out of Gaza and how you chose.
This was actually initiated by the publisher Alan Morrison. He wrote to me and he wanted me to get something. You could see that it was a British weekly done, and he didn't know much about Gaza. So I sat down and wrote the introduction, and then I was very at that moment I was very concerned that I want to have Gazan voices, and particularly the martyrs, people who have been killed by Israel. And there was Hiba Abu Nada and Rifat al-Arair, and I translated Hiba. And we put it together quite quickly. And then we're sort of voices that interact with Gaza, engage with what happened in Gaza, whether previously, because this kind of devastation has been going on for some time. But this is obviously the most intense and the most destructive that it has been. So the collection was put with the sort of point in mind that we want to give people a sense of how Gazans have written about themselves while this massacre and genocide is going against them, but also how people from outside, Palestinian diaspora, have interacted with Gaza. And this is why you have names, various names in that collection. And I wrote an introduction for it. It was very moving. It was actually very hard to write because it was just sort of very raw. And again, I wanted to give people a sense of Gaza's history and how we got to where we are, and how destructive and utterly inhumane the situation is. So I wanted to sort of link the political with the literary, because there is really a Palestinian genius in terms of literature, and Gaza is just one node of it, one important aspect to it, absolutely. So I wanted to get that across, and I hope the volume somehow does justice to that.
So yeah, if you could read your poem, we'd be grateful.
Okay, okay, I'll read it. So shall I read it بالعربي ولا in both language?
Yeah.
Okay. So أمشي النهار كأننا لم ندري ما نعرف، ولم نكن نسمع ما ألفت أصواتنا، نتوه في الصمت والصمت برية واسعة. هل ألفنا الضوء يوما صار نهجا لغيرنا فاتبعناه. نحن حجارة تمشي على الأرض ملقاة عليها، والنجوم قبس من كلامنا، كلامنا الأسى علينا. ونحن نغيب في أنفسنا وتحضر فينا الأماني. وعينا لا يبدأ القول ولا يكمله. من منا حل بنا علينا. لم يكن للشعر أصل ولا فصل، لكنها الأيام مرايا وتزول. أكتب الليل عله يبرق ثم أشفى. أطلع النهار أتسلقه أتملك الطرق. So this is walking the day as if we don't know and do not hear what our voices perceived. We surrender to silence, the vast field of silence. Have we grown accustomed to light? It grew into a guide for others, and we followed it. We are stones walking the earth, strewn across it, the star tufts of our language, our house of lament. We disappear in ourselves only to emerge within wishes. Consciousness neither begins with language nor completes it. Who amongst us has visited ourselves? Poetry posts neither an origin nor an ethnicity, but it is the day's fleeting mirrors. I ride the night to recover from it. I wander through the day, clamber over it, haggle with the roads. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Atif. So next is Basman. You can unmute yourself. Basman Adirawi is a poet, physiotherapist, and graduate of Al Azhar University in Gaza. Inspired by an interest in music, movies, and the people with special needs, he's contributed dozens of stories to the online platform We Are Not Numbers. His poetry appears in the collection Light in Gaza, available from Haymarket Books, the collection Poems for Palestine from the group Publishers for Palestine, the Rumpus Arablet, and elsewhere. He joins us now from Cairo. You, Basman.
Thank you, Marissa, and thank you all for joining us. And I want to thank you, Marissa, especially because you coordinate this beautiful issue, and I know it's hard for us and for you in such a dark time. The point is, I'm going to share one of my poems, which is cited by Eight Fingers. The poem is about I haven't been in Gaza since before the October 7th. I was in Cairo for a training course in physiotherapy. I'm a physiotherapist at the Ministry of Health in Gaza. And then the war started. And the idea is that watching the war from afar is really a horrible experience, a new horrible experience for me. My family was in Gaza, my friends was in Gaza, and I was here in Egypt. So the point is, I literally count the minutes and the hours to know that they are okay, to get in contact with them. And I know they also counted the minutes and the hours and even the loss of the bed, and also the minutes when they had to evacuate. The idea of the poem is about counting things, and I lost, sadly, two of my best friends, and I lost my young sister along with her husband and her family. So this poem is about counting and losing. So I'm going to read it in both Arabic and English. I'm gonna start now reading in Arabic and then in English, and then we can give the floor to Huda. So 8 fingers. I'm gonna start with Arabic. أعد الأشياء كأن أعد ساعات الليل كي يأتي صباح، ثم أعد ساعات الصباح أملا أن ينتهي الصوت. أعد أصوات القذائف ومرات احتمال موتي. أعد أرغفتي كي أتذكر لا تأكل رغيف أخيك، لا تتركه يموت جائع. أعد الغيوم في السماء قبل أن يغطيها غبار الصواريخ المرسلة بالموت. أمشي في الطريق أعد ما تبقى من بيوت وآثار شوارع. هنا مشيت يوما، هنا ضحكت، هنا بكيت، كي لا أنسى يوما. أحفظ شكلها الأخير قبل تعليقها عارية على مشنقة. أعد الشامات في جسدي كلحظات وداع قبل أن يبتر عدوي شيئا من لحمي. أعد القصائد كي أراجع. من منهم ربما ستقتل غير مكتملة كجنين لم يولد. من منهم ربما لم تتنفس بعد كطفل خديج. أعد أصدقائي قبل خبر عاجل. بالأمس كانوا 10، عددتهم على أصابع يدي، لكن استيقظت اليوم ب8 أصابع. So this is the English. I'm gonna read it now. I count things as if I'm counting the hours until sunrise. Then I count the hours of the morning, hoping the sound will end. I count the sound of missiles and how many times I could have died. I count my loaves, reminding myself not to eat my brothers. Don't let him die hungry. I count the clouds in the sky before they covered in the dust from the missiles sent for death. I walk on the street, counting what houses and the traces remain. I've walked here once. I've loved here once. I've cried here once. I don't forget how the city looks. I've memorized it before it hangs naked from a glows. I count the moles on my body, as if to say goodbye, before the enemy cuts off a limb. I count bones, thinking, which of them will be killed, unfinished, like an unborn child? Some have not even taken a breath, like a baby born too soon. I count my friends before the breaking news. Yesterday, they were 10. I counted them on my fingers. But today, thank you.
Thank you, Basman. There was a little bit of a lag there at the end, but now there are 8. Next is Huda Fakhreddin. Thank you, Basman. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We're so grateful and so grateful for all your contributions to all these publications. Next is Huda Fakhreddin, who we're honored to have with us, who is a writer, scholar, and translator, and who inspired the name of this issue. She's the author of a number of academic works, as well as a book of creative nonfiction, A Small Time Under a Different Sun, published by Dara Nahde in 2019. Her translations of Arabic poems have appeared in many journals, and she's Associate Professor of Arabic Literature at the University of Pennsylvania, co-editor of Middle Eastern Literatures, and an editor of the Library of Arabic Literature. For this issue, she shared her translation of 2 poems. And so I just give it over to Huda.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you very much for making so many beautiful things possible in this most excruciating and dark, dark time. I was looking forward to meeting Muhammad and Mahmoud, and I hope that they are all right. I'd like to thank them very much for this very special issue. It is a gift to be with them and with the rest of the contributors in communion on the pages of this very special issue dedicated to Gaza. Gaza has always been our moral compass. It is the land that has launched every intifada against oppression and injustice and arrogant racism. And for 7 months now, we've all been saying Palestine will be free and Palestine will free us all along the way. And we see around us a generation of young people in this country and around the world who have been forever marked and transformed by Gaza. They are bravely, and I'm speaking to you now from the University of Pennsylvania, where students, like their peers, across this country and around the world are bravely putting their bodies in danger, facing violence, to say no to genocide. And they are exposing the corruption, the complicity of all institutions around us, all our structures of life. We are all somewhere on the spectrum of complicity. And the least we could do is speak up and say no to genocide. And from where I sit here in the field of Arabic studies or Middle Eastern studies in this country, the United States of America, one of the most disappointing and despicable forms of complicity is the silence of academics and so-called experts who have been pontificating on the lives of Arabs and Palestinians and making a living, profiting from those positions, and who are now absolutely silent. But thank God for the students. Thank God for the students who have found a sense of purpose and have found a cause to live for in Gaza. They have found a true education in their ability to stand up and say no to genocide. But is the solidarity and this enlightenment and our righteousness and our feelings of doing the right thing worth 35,000 Palestinians murdered and 15,000 children slaughtered? No. None of that is worth it if we do not center Gaza, and hence the value and beauty of this issue that has come to light in collaboration with our colleagues and our friends and family in Gaza. None of our solidarity stands make sense or are enough or adequate. They are even grotesque if they do not center Gaza and are truly sincere work towards ending this genocide. Because at the end of the day, this is day 224 of genocide, more than 76 years of ethnic cleansing. From this day on, there is no excuse. There was never, ever any excuse. But from this day on, we look to Gaza for a language. We look to Gaza for ways of surviving, existing, and resisting. And we look to Gaza for a future. From this day and until the day Palestine is free. I am very moved to be with you in this virtual room, and I really hope Muhammad and Mahmoud are okay, and I hope we get a chance to meet somewhere in brighter days in a room with windows and a clear blue sky. I am going to read from my translation of Samir Abu Hawash's poem, From the River to the Sea. I will read a short excerpt from the opening and then another short excerpt from the ending. I'll begin with Arabic and I'll end with English. من النهر إلى البحر كل شارع كل بيت كل غرفة كل نافذة كل جدار كل حجر كل شجن كل كلمة كل حرف كل همسة كل لمسة كل نظرة كل قبلة كل شجرة كل عشبة كل دمعة كل صرخة كل هواء كل رجاء كل دعاء كل سر كل بئر كل صلاة كل أغنية كل موال كل كتاب كل ورقة كل لون كل شعاع كل غيمة كل مطر كل قطرة مطر كل نقطة عرق كل لثغة كل تأتأة كل يما كل يابا كل ظل كل ضوء كل يد صغيرة رسمت في دفتر صغير شجرة أو شارعا أو بيتا أو قلبا أو عائلة من أب وأم وإخوة وحيوانات. Every dream, every illusion, every hope, every disappointment, every hand holding another hand, every hand alone, every scattered thought, every beautiful thought, every terrifying thought, every whisper, every touch, every street, every house, every room, every balcony, every eye, every tear, every word, every letter, every name, every voice, every name, every house, every name, every face, every name, every cloud, every name, every rose, every name, every spear of grass, every name, every wave, every grain of sand, every street, every kiss, every image, every eye, every tear, every yamma, every yaba, every name, every name, every name, every name, every name, every name, all. From the river to the sea, may there be light, life, and equality and justice for all, and may every child, from the river to the sea, have the right to grow up. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'll turn to Salma now. Thank you.
Thank you, Huda. That was beautiful. So it's hard to follow that, but Selma Harland is a British Egyptian literary translator and editor who works between Arabic and English. She's won a number of grants and awards, etc. Anyway, she wrote a major piece for this issue called Naming Gaza, and she also contributed several translations. She did a lot of work for this issue, and we're very grateful to Selma. Thank you. So go ahead, Selma.
It's just really difficult to keep one's tears from just flowing. So apologies if I yeah. um obviously it doesn't just go back to October 2023, but uh over the last 6 or 7 months in particular, there have been a huge rise in outrageous claims and narratives and counter narratives and pinkwashing, just things that call into question Gaza's place in history, the Palestinians' place in history, the whole region's place in history. And I do know that, of course, there are many academics who have already written extensive amounts of work about how far in history does Gaza go. But I thought it was also important to let non-academics also know about that um, side of Gaza. Um, so I think I was a bit naive initially when I was thinking, yeah, I can just write like 5, 6 pages about that easily. And I was just surprised by the amount of information and the long history that Gaza has, not just in Middle Eastern, North African, and Arabian resources, but also in Western literatures. Uh, and I tried my best, but there is also an obvious lack of knowledge when it comes to um, archaeological resources that are excavated from Gaza itself, because for obvious reasons, Gaza have never been excavated properly until now. But from what we do now is that the earliest known urban settlements that came to be in Gaza date back to the Copper and Early Bronze Age. And those settlements date back to 4th century, 3500 BC in the area called Tellus II, which is now the north of Wadi Gaza. And the earliest mention that we know of Gaza have actually been found not in Gaza itself, but in Egypt, in the south of Egypt, in the Karnak temple, where Thutmose III in ordered inscriptions to be written about his battles through the region. So in 1457 BCE, the Battle of Megiddo happened, in which Thutmose III had to stop Durosha, king of Kadesh, from occupying Gaza and East Sinai. So in those inscriptions, which are found in the Holy of Holies in the Karnak temple, the Battle of Megiddo inscription mention loads of city names and town names and fortresses that the army of Thutmose passed through until they finally reached the Canaanite settlement of the king of Kadesh. And among those cities that he passed through was Gaza. And Gaza actually remained loyal to Egypt. So rather, Gaza is described as a place of refuge where there were palm trees and water wells, and uh, no battles happened in Gaza during that day. They just rather rested, um, rehydrated, and touching down. Then later, in 1353 BC, we find another mention of Gaza in the Amarna tablets. Uh, the Amarna tablets was also found in South Egypt, in Tell el Amarna area, which used to be the capital of ancient Egypt under Pharaoh Akhenaten. And the Amarna tablets, hmm, they are written in Akkadian, cuneiform, Canaanite, Korean, uh, and they are mostly just correspondences between Egyptian pharaohs, military officers, and other rulers of surrounding states that were under Egyptian surveillance or government. And Gaza is mentioned several times in the Amarna tablets. So, for example, in Amarna tablets 202, um, um, the officer Yabitri, who was the guardian of Gaza, who is like the officer or the governor of Gaza. Uh, Apparently, Pharaoh Akhenaten had rumors about Yabitri's loyalty, and that Yabitri was rather conspiring against Akhenaten. So Yabitri wrote to Akhenaten telling him, I've always been loyal. You actually was there during my upbringing. You're the one who uh, placed me in Gaza, etc., etc. And I forgot to mention that the name Gaza barely changed throughout history. So, for instance, in Thutmose III's inscriptions, Gaza was called Gazeter. In the Amarna tablets a few centuries later, it was called Azati, and so on and so forth. So even the name barely changed through the millennia. Um, then later on, in 1290 BC, we find that under the reign of Ramses II and Seti II, um, Gaza is again mentioned under the name Qadat or Qadat, and instead, uh, uh, scribes mention Gaza as a way of testing each other's knowledge. So a soldier scribe cannot really be called an expert or whatever, unless they know certain city names, including Gaza. So it was a test of knowledge to know the name of Gaza. Um, and then if we leave Egypt now and go as far as Yemen, we found that in Sabaik and Minyan texts, Gazette, which was the Minyan and Sabaik name of Gaza, have been mentioned numerous times from 1000 BCE to the 6th century CE. And it was known for uh, a trade center, a producer of wine, a producer of silk, and a producer of spices. Um, and from this period, we find numerous dedicatory texts for religious purposes that mention that um, so and so caravan went all the way to Gaza, all the difficulties they had to go through, but they finally made it to Gaza, brought back all of these exotic products back to Yemen, and then they thank the gods uh, after Dukhabad, Al-Maqam, etc., their local gods. And then when it comes to the Roman era, we find that Gaza have been known to make its own coins during the Hellenistic and Roman periods. Um, where again Gaza at the time was known by its modern name, Gaza. So we find, for instance, that in the uh, 1st century BCE, a common motif on those Gazan coins was the depiction of Gaza as a city of refuge and as a place of peace. We often find depictions of the Greek goddesses Tyche and Io holding hands, and the Greek mythology goes as follows: that Zeus, who is married to Hera, rather fell in love with one of Hera's priestesses, Io. So Hera ended up cursing Io uh, to always wander the land in the shape of a heifer or an animal. Uh, and Io just crossed seas and finally found a place of refuge in Gaza, where Tyche, the city goddess and representative of Gaza, welcomed her. And this is why you find this common motif of Tyche and Io holding hands on Gazan coins from the Hellenistic and Roman period. And then if we go to Arabic, uh, we find, for instance, the Nisana calls papyrus collection, which is a collection of over 200 papyri that were found in uh, Awjat al-Kafir, which is Western Najaf and Eastern Sinai. Among those 200 papyri, there were many text collection documents that mention Gaza by name. And and what's unique about those papyri is that they were marking the transition of the administrative language in that area in Gaza from the Greek, from the Roman to Arabic. So we find, for instance, this papyri, which is called Misana called papyrus number 60. It's actually trilingual, and it's written in Greek, in Arabic, and on something else. I'm not sure. I don't remember. But anyway, so this papyrus was actually issued under the orders of Umayyad Caliph Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan in the 7th century CE. And it was asking or demanding the people of Gaza to pay their taxes due for a few months in return of protection services, etc. Um, then later on, if we look at Arabic poetry, we find that medieval Arabic encyclopedias mention that the citations of Gaza in classical Arabic poetry go back to as far as 6th century CE. And in Arabic poems, Gaza was often mentioned either again as a place of refuge where people seek shelter, water, accommodation, or a trade center, again known for its fine wines, or a place where Hashem, the grandfather of Prophet Muhammad, died. So, and this is why we find that in Arabic poetry, Gaza was known as Gaza, Ghazdat, Ghazdat Hashem, and so on and so forth. For instance, Arab poet and military commander Abu Zu'aib al-Hudhali refers to Gazan wine as the finest of all wines. He writes, فما فضلة من أزرعة هوت بها مذكرة عنس كهادية الدهر سلافة راح دمنتها إداوة مخيرة رب زياخرة البحر تزودها من أهل بصرة وغزة على جسرة مرفوعة الزايد والكأس. Many wines of Adra I have laden on a she-camel, stout as a stallion, steady as a rock in shallow water, with the choicest of all pure wines, carried in pitch-black waterskins in subtle bags at the caravan's rear, brought all the way from Basra and Gaza, on a splendid creature speeding sprightly with a steady stride and a raised tail. Then, for instance, we find that Islamic Arab poet Matrud bin Ka'b al-Khuzai refers to Gaza as Ghazat Hashim, and he says, مات النبي بالشام لما أنفاوى أودى بغزة هاشم لا يبعد فجفانه رذما لمن ينتابه والنصر أدنى باللسان وباليد. The generous man passed away in the Levant. He died in Ghazat Hashim, never again to depart. The most gracious host, he was kind to the hungry, and his hand and tongue brought about victory. So Al-Khuzai obviously wasn't the only person who wrote about Hashim, Muhammad's grandfather. We also find another mention of Gaza as Ghazat Hashim by Abbasid poet Abu Nawas. And he says, وأصبحنا قد فوزنا عن نهر فطرس وهن عن البيت المقدس جور طوالب بالركبان غزة هاشم وبالفرمة من حاجهن شعور. After the she camels left Fortress River, they couldn't make it to Jerusalem, ushering the riders towards Ghazat Hashim instead, their hearts yearning for a farmer. So obviously there are so many examples of Gaza as Ghazat Hashim and as Ghazat, the plural of Gaza, in Arabic poetry from that period. But I'm concerned that time is probably up for now. And yeah, so that's basically it.
Thank you so much, Salma. We really appreciate your work in this issue. So that actually moves kind of smoothly into Huda's work. Huda Shawa, who is a Palestinian Kuwaiti children's and YA writer living in Kuwait. She's the founder and managing director of Taqa Productions and has won several awards for her books for children and young adults. For this issue, she shared an excerpt of her forthcoming graphic novel, Gilgamesh's Skull, which was translated for the issue by Anam Zafar and Nadia. And it does talk to this, this aspect of archaeological digs. And so I will just actually turn it over to Huda, and I will share a few images from this graphic novel, which I think is still forthcoming from Tamer Institute.
Yes, thank you, Masha, and thank you for all your efforts to highlight Gaza during the commemoration of the official Nakba in May 1948, ongoing, of course, till May 24. Yes, thank you, Selma, for that journey into history. And while Huda Fakhreddin talked about looking to the future, we really need to go back to the past. And what I'm interested in while I was growing up in Gaza as a young teenager was the history of Gaza. And I remember that my grandmother, and her name is Mahdiya, and I'm named Huda after her, she once told me a story about a hoard of gold that was found in somewhere near Gaza's shore. And she described mummies and gold jewelry and ornaments and a gold diadem that once was on the head of an ancient queen. So the image of that golden diadem on that queen stayed with me. And it was many, many years later that when I visited the British Museum that I found some of that Gazan gold. My grandmother never saw that gold, but she'd heard the stories of excavations in Gaza. And the gold went to the British Museum through the complicity, and I use that word again from Huda Fakhreddin, complicity of archaeology, specifically archaeology during the British Mandate. The British archaeologist who found that gold in Gaza was Flinders Petrie. I don't know if Selma mentioned his name. I didn't hear his name in your long wonderful description of Gaza's history. However, he worked in Tell el-Ajul, in a mound located around 10 kilometers south of Gaza in 1933. So this is in the 1930s during the British Mandate. And he was coined the father of archaeology. And pieces of that hoard, like I said, were sold to the British Museum by his wife. Him, his wife, Hilda Petrie, they all were part of an excavation, a dig in Tell el-Ajul during the 1930s. And there was a young assistant as well who worked under Petrie, and her name was Olga Tafna. And they discovered many artifacts, the Ishtar, gold, scarabs from the Hyksos and from the ancient Egypt, mummies as well, and all was dispersed across the museums of the world, mainly also to the British Museum. In London, there's the Petrie Museum of Archaeology next to UCL, where you can see one of the largest collections of Egyptian archaeology in the world, actually. But his Petrie interest in Palestine was driven by biblical pursuits. They were all looking for the ancient cities of the Bible. And his pursuit was to search for a biblical area called Lachish, which he thought was in Gaza. And that's why all these digs went on. However, later it was to be found in somewhere else, supposedly, in Tel Edouer, which is a village between Hebron and Jerusalem. And that's where Olga Tafnel relocated. She defected from Petrie's dig and moved over to another area with another expert in archaeology, James Leslie Starkey. So all this is going into a graphic novel, and the graphic novel is called Gilgamesh's Skull, and that references the Assyrians' role in Gaza, like you just described, Selma, that ancient history where Gaza was at the crossroads of all those vying and battling superpowers, and the superpowers of ancient times were the Assyrians versus the ancient Egyptians, the pharaohs. And Gaza was caught in the middle, as it is today, between those two vying superpowers. So it's the Assyrians versus the ancient Egyptians, and Gaza had to bear the brunt of those battles. Marsha, did you show us a slide of the work? Thank you. The term skull references Flinders Petrie's interest in accumulating and looking for and digging up hundreds of skulls, both in Egypt and in Palestine, because he was interested in racial theories of the time, specifically of racial difference and superior races, and measuring skulls was an important pursuit of those theories. I want to see which slide you're showing, Marsha, so I can just read it out. I think it's a letter. It's a letter from the young archaeologist, Olga Tafnel, who's writing to a professor, and she's telling her, my dear Edith Porada is a renowned professor of archaeology as well, and she studied cylinder seals, which had Akkadian inscriptions that would tell little passages of history or documents of ownership. And in my story, a woman flees ancient Babylon because of war. She's on the move, and she flees to Gaza to seek refuge in Gaza. And this cylinder seal has reoccurs during the years. So it is transported from Mesopotamia, from ancient Mesopotamia to Gaza in ancient times, but then it shows up in a dig in the 1930s. And this is when Olga Tafnel, who receives the cylinder seal that is originally from ancient Iraq, from Mesopotamia, found in a dig in Gaza in the 1930s. And she tells of all these findings to her professor, Edith Porada, and she writes to her, as promised, I'm sending you our news from Tel El Ajul site this spring. We have found 192 scarabs and more cylinder seals, the largest collection in Palestine. I should think most bear the names of pharaohs, and some have the names of 2 Hyksos kings. Selma mentioned one of them. Another cylinder seal was found today, this time made of green jade with the goddess Ishtar engraved upon it. It appears to be a protective amulet. I may have an opportunity to see the buried treasure that was excavated in Tel El Ajul. Professor Petrie believes the artifacts were offerings to Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. I must go to treat the wife of one of my workers. She has gone blind. You cannot imagine the demand for the small clinic that I have opened. Olga Tafnel. So this is part of the graphic novel that will be published by Terman Institute for Community Education. And the wonderful illustrations are by Michel Jabarin. He's a Palestinian artist based in Berlin, and we work together on this project. It's still ongoing. I'm still waiting for Michael to finish his images. So Michael, if you're there, please send them in. The text is ready, but it is addressed to a young adult, to the students, and a young adult readership. It's written in Arabic and hopefully will also be translated to English. Actually, the translation here was done by Ilham and Anar, right? And I'm really excited for this project to come out, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Huda. Thank you so much for sharing your work. It was important to us to share this large section of work called This Moment, of which Basmans was a part of reflections on the now, but also to give this wide picture of Gaza through time. And thank you for being part of that. Next, Olivia Aliès, a poet of the Palestinian diaspora, will read her poem Tender, but first she was born in Haifa in 1944, writes in French. Then Lebanon, where her family took refuge in 1948, then Montreal, Canada, and now she's in Paris. Her debut collection in English, Chaos Crossing, was translated by Karim James Abu Zaid and published by World Poetry. A chapbook of Alias's long poem, Your Name Palestine, was translated by Sarah Riggs and Jeremy Robert for World Poetry as well. In this issue, she shares her poem Tender, which she will read in French, and then Salma will read in her Arabic and Karim's English translations. Thank you, Olivia.
You're muted. We can't hear you.
Open the sound. So sorry. Okay. Oh, not even. Okay.
We have you now.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay. I was saying. Okay. Thank you for this issue and for showing all the talents of Gaza, the importance, the culture, historical culture, and of Gaza, and empowering the people there also. So this poem, it's Marcia who chose it, in fact. I sent her some and she chose this one. And I like it a lot. It's a small poem, but you will understand why after. Soyons doux, soyons tendres, ventre de pigeon. Dans mes bras, l'enfant de Gaza. Douceur, goutte à goutte, malgré les balles, suivant ligne de faille, plus obstiné que roche. Cruauté pulvérisée.
Let's be soft, tender. Pigeon's belly in my arms, the child of Gaza. Sweetness drop by, gentle drop despite the bullets, following forked lines, more stubborn than drop, a pulverized cruelty. لنكن لطفاء رقيقين كصدر حمامة خطف لغزة بين ذراعي. عذوبة تتركرك قطرة فقطرة بوجه الرصاص المنهمر فوق خطوط النار أكثر صلابة من الحجر تسحق الوحشية.
Thank you, Samar. Okay. I like this poem because it shows our tender side, how much our people like, you know, love life and like love family and love social interconnections. And also I wanted something it's part of this book Masha gave the title Chaos Crossing, which was about the chaos, you know, and the chaos of the world. But, you know, chaos, we know it as Palestinian for so long. And there is chaos, the other term, crossing, it's my own personal crossing of making a life through this chaos. So there are personal poems and more collective poems. So I say, I like this poem because of this aspect of tenderness, of love that I find characterize the Palestinian people, and also because it puts the focus on the power of softness. It's like water. Water drop by drop can dig a mountain, and this is about it. So tenderness, power of the soft, and also the energy of a social movement. In history, the history of the first part of the 20th century, it's marked by the liberation of all the people in Africa, in South Africa, in Asia, of the big empires. The French has to leave Algeria. The British lost their empire. The Belgium lost Congo. After that, the United States had to leave, you know, with the helicopter, Vietnam, the last ones. They had to leave Afghanistan. And now I think one of the reasons they are all behind Israel, they had lost all those battles. And now they think they will compensate that in submitting us, you know, these little people, and putting all their powerful arms against us. What will I say else? I didn't I prepare for that. I will say that Gaza is really for me, in French you say a red thread, un fil rouge. I don't know if you have the expression in English, in my writing, because I decided to publish very, very, very late, unusually late, you know, in the first book, a little booklet, you know, that I edit myself because I had some fund of a foundation, and with a friend we sold 3,000 copies, and all the proceeds we sent to Gaza. And after that, I liked the experience of publishing and exchanging, and that was the beginning of the adventure, you know, which continues today. So this booklet was about, the title was I Am a Child of Gaza. I am a child of the tunnel, not a child of the light, things like that. A very long poem that I wrote from, like, you know, without interruption of 3 pages. And so Gaza, in all my books, you find poems about Gaza. You find in the second one, which is L'espoir pour seule protection, hope for only protection. In Chaos, you have a lot of several poems about Gaza. And in the new manuscript on which I am working, because you can't publish today things that were ready yesterday with what happened in Gaza. You can't put that aside. And during all from October to now, I wrote a lot because an editor in French asked me to send him poems, and I commit to make a part of a book. And there is a second author. We have each one a part. It was very, very difficult at the beginning. I said, why did I commit? Because I was too much close from the reality, too much descriptive. And so I have really, really to work and to make something which is not only a description. But at the end, I don't know who spoke of the silence. And my last poem of my part was, now it's time to honor the death, to enter in silence.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you so much for joining us and for talking to us about your poetry and your process.
Thank you, Marcia.
So last, Tom, thank you so much for joining us. And Tom will also return to a classical translation that he did for this issue. And Tom Abisamra is a PhD student in Near Eastern Studies at Princeton and works on pre-colonial Arabic literature. And we're so grateful for his contribution to this issue. I'm going to briefly attempt to share the screen properly this time, showing his work, and then go ahead and Tom, take it away.
Yeah, first, thank you so much for putting this together, both, I mean, the magazine, so proud of it. I was walking around, all around campus showing it to people. And also for this event, as everyone said, it's very nice to congregate together, even if virtually. I think this kind of little translation came about almost selfishly because I try to find purpose doing, like not modern stuff in a time that is so pressing and feels that we should be, as Olivia said, we feel like a poem that we wrote yesterday is already outdated. And so I had worked on Al-Nabulsi before and on his travelogues, and so I went back to it looking for Gaza, knowing that he passed by. And I was originally gonna translate a part, like a few pages earlier, I believe he mentions Gaza itself, but then I come across Khan Yunis. And at the time I was working on this a couple of months ago, Khan Yunis was in the news all the time. I mean, it still is, but now, day by day. But at the time, Khan Yunis was on my mind, and reading this kind of little section, the travelogue part on Khan Yunis, I was blown away by how Khan Yunis was conceptualized spatially in relation to Egypt, but then also unexpectedly in the poem at the end in relation to Jerusalem. I think the part where Khan Yunis was kind of seen as like a transition into Egypt made me a bit uncomfortable, because it almost made me feel like, it's kind of making the argument that Khan Yunis is part of Egypt, and there was this whole discussion about displacing Gazans into the Sinai. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I was like, no, but I mean, borders are fake, right? We all know that. So I think, the hopeful way, the non-cynical way of reading this is that, the flow of people and things was only natural. So I decided that, the past, in a way, maybe a bit ironically, gives us a model for the future through this, I mean, very short section from the travelogue that Nabulsi was that he took a trip from Damascus through Egypt and to the Hijaz for Hajj. I think what I'll do is maybe read just the last poem, in which I mean, I was always fascinated by Nabulsi's ability to be very local in his poetry, but at the same time, kind of transcend that specificity and kind of like exploded into something that is like almost magical. And he's able to do that in not many lines. So I'll read the Arabic. I didn't prepare the Arabic, but I think I can do it. And then maybe read the English translation. Okay, so this is the poem on Khan Yunis by عبد الغني النابلسي. جئنا إلى الخان المضاف ليونس والوقت يؤنس فيه من لم يؤنس من غزة الفيحة إليه مسيرنا في رفقة من كل شهم مؤنس حتى اطمأن بنا المقام على الحمى وزهت به منا كرام الأنفس لله ليلتنا بأعلى جامع فيه وأحسن دهرنا ذاك المسي تتابعت من ربنا ألطافه ولقد نعمنا بالمقام الأقدس فسقى الإله هناك ساحة منزل غرست به العلياء أطيب مغرس قوم كرام في الأنام أعزة لبسوا من الجدوى ثياب السندس لا زالت البركات في أرض بها هم نازلون لدى الجوار الأقعس والله ينعم بالسرور وبالهنا في ظل حصن للكمال مؤسس طول المدى ما هبت النسمات في سحر لنا من نحو بيت المقدس. From Gaza, the most grand, to the Khan of Yunis, where even the unhappy have a good time. Safely we arrived with the most courteous of companions, where the soul's virtues emanated. By God, we spent the night in the highest of mosques, and our fate that night became flawless. Flooded with God's bounties, we basked in the heavenly station, where God watered a house's backyard, the sky enriching its lands with the sweetest of enrichment. The most dignified dawn from the rain, cloaks of shimmering silk, and the blessedness of their land that lies near the most mighty endures. God bestows in the shadows of a fortress a cornerstone of perfection, happiness and bliss, a breeze at dawn blowing all the way from Jerusalem. I think I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
So to end, I want to circle back around to the two people who are the kind of the heart of this enterprise who aren't here today, which is Mohammed and Mahmoud, who through several months really worked incredibly, not just to gather texts from writers around Gaza and to facilitate all these small details of putting together a publication, such as how do people want their names transliterated, and what kind of bios do they want, and how should we have the table of contents laid out, and through the most incredibly difficult of circumstances when they're trying to also get food and water and basic safety. So incredibly grateful to them for bringing this all together, for setting the order of the pieces in the magazine, and really to all the finest details. So sorry that you were not able to join us today, and thinking about you all the time. So thanks everybody for joining us today. I think with that we'll wrap up.
Thank you.
And
Thank you so